Hi, my name is Xander Bittman. I am a product manager. I was recently let go from Salesforce and took the opportunity to think about how I think about product management, how I think product management could be better, some of the common challenges and pitfalls around product management, particularly at a larger organization. This is based on my experiences 20 years as a practitioner, always with a product manager title, although often quite in different shapes than I'm going to talk about here. But it really also helped me think about what do I want to do going forward in my career. And that really is to focus on being responsible and accountable to solving problems that customers face and building a business on a product. So this started as an introduction to Scrum teams that I was working with at Salesforce. I should say working for. I was the product owner of teams. The vast majority of my time as a product manager, 95% of it has been as an individual contributor, but a lot of it is based on the Agile Manifesto, where you have a product owner, typically with a product manager title. It's not like there's another separate product manager, but then the product owner of a Scrum team um, who directs the work of a team of engineers, often with a user experience designer and other supporting functions to develop a product strategy, define the product, ship the product, see if it's successful, and so on. But interestingly, from the um, some of the interviews I've had recently, there's a shift which I think makes a lot of sense in the industry that product managers are not product owners, and which I think really makes sense because Agile is great for shipping a testable product fast, but it's not really optimized for learning, even though that's um, you know part of part of the intent of Agile is to learn by shipping, but it tends to draw boundaries around Scrum teams. And the real world is much messier than Scrum teams. And from my own experience, what I found is that Scrum teams end up with very rigid boundaries around uh, the solution space. So I like the direction that I'm hearing from companies that I'm interviewing with, from other peers that I'm talking to, and I think that evolution makes sense for a reason. Although I think it will come with its own challenges. There's no one right way to do product management. It's really much more important to have the conversation and make decisions around how to organize product management, how to incentivize product managers in particular, um, and how to make trade offs. So these are just some of my thoughts on it and maybe some examples, really to help, especially new product managers, think of maybe people who are considering becoming product managers, realize that it is a perennially challenging but a very fulfilling, very interesting career choice, but filled with ambiguity, which a creative, driven, decisive person can thrive in. Okay, so what is product management? To me, it's simple, can be simple. Find a need and fill it. How hard could that be, right? Okay, let's get more specific. Find a need and fill it with a product or a feature. So, product management is ultimately creating a product that customers buy. And that should lead to a profit. Now, we'll talk about revenue here, but profit is really are you making more money than you're spending? It's often trickier to measure and particularly hard to measure at a larger organization where you may have hundreds of product managers, thousands of engineers, not to mention other supporting functions, to draw a clear line between any given team or a loosely affiliated team or group of people working together to show their impact on profit. But it certainly is a worthy effort and an attempt, however formally or informally. Okay, now let's split it out a little bit. So let's separate it to the problem space and solution space. So find an unmet need that many people will pay a lot for. So here we're talking about customer market segments, willingness to pay. Often, I use that as a proxy for customer pain. How bad is the pain that customers are experiencing right now? Are they looking for new solutions? Are they just living with the pain because they don't realize that there might be a better way? All that is, gold for a product manager. And then the solution space. How do you solve that problem? How might you solve that problem? How are you solving it right now? How could it be better? And again, tying it back to profit. Okay, so now I call this activities related to product management. And these are not all product managers will do all of these things. It depends so heavily on the situation that you're in, but they are all related to product management. And I say that because you may be working on a product area that is has been around for 20 years. It was the case with some things that I worked on at Salesforce, that they don't have a big go-to-market function. There's no product marketing team that's spending a lot of time on incremental features. But then I've also worked on new product introductions that have a huge go-to-market aspect. Um, and it's just completely different. So a lot of it is just understanding and assessing the situation that you're put into, and what what are the needs to get the product to where it needs to be, whether that be product market fit or a particular goal such as revenue growth, and then how is the company funded it. So I'll talk through it a little bit more step by step. So top left, right, this is the customer problem that you've identified, uh, and this is really getting out in the market, talking to customers, going to conferences, to a certain degree competitive analysis to see what other competitors are doing that may have you point in a certain direction to see what else what else is out there that you should be paying attention to. Um, so this could be paid market research that you could choose to outsource. You will, if you are a product manager working on a space that has a lot of um, has a lot of visibility or a lot of attention, people will come to you wanting to share information with you. So that's all sort of the starting point. Now, I should say starting point is a great simplification. At any point, any of these things could change, could surface. So while it looks like a linear flow chart here, in reality, it's not. The real world is messy, and that is true through all of this. But I think it's important to think about it from a simplistic standpoint, because it can help you break down where are you in the process and where do you need to do more, do less, do differently, those kinds of things. So I think that is the main takeaway, is that even though there may be potentially hundreds of people working on quote your product or your problem, it really is the product manager's responsibility to evaluate how everything fits together. So very much systems thinking to identify where there are challenges, where there are missed opportunities. Do you need to go back to the drawing board on any of these things, or hit a reset? Okay, so let's start with the customer problem side. Like me personally, I've spent 40 hours in a contact center in Manila, as part of working on the platform in Salesforce, just to see how do people use Salesforce in the real world, how are they using other products. So I try to sit with end users and just do shadow sessions very regularly. There's really no substitute for seeing what customers are doing with your own eyes. Okay, the next set, these three I think go strongly together, but not necessarily linear. So it is the product manager's responsibility either to set or to buy in on, or to somehow play very much a leadership role in goals. So that could be growing revenue by a certain percent, um, addressing uh, quality issues, any number of things that you want to change about that will create value for your customers and value for your business. And then that maps to a strategy and a product strategy. And the strategy is very much the how. How will you accomplish the goals? And product strategy in particular is that very specific level of how will the product support the strategy. I have OKRs here, objectives and key results. There are a variety of different ways that you can codify and structure what you want to accomplish and how you want to accomplish it. That's the intent of that. So the next one is funding teams to attempt to solve the customer problem. This is an area in particular where I want to grow. So much of my career has been spent, as I said at the beginning, as being the product owner of a Scrum team, and that Scrum team in most cases existed before I was there, I was hired to be the product manager slash product owner with a very specific boundary. I shouldn't say very specific, but a general idea of what the Scrum team was going to be working on. Where I want to stretch myself is saying, well, this is what my team is now, or maybe I don't even have a team. This is the problem. These are the teams that exist right now, but maybe this team should be larger. This team should be wound down. Some new team should be created to support the product strategy. That's where I want to grow. That's where great product manager leaders spend a lot of their time. Okay, now we move more into the solution space. So designing and building a product that you think will solve the customer problem. So this is about minimum delightful product, minimum viable product, and then iterating on that almost endlessly. It's really up to the product manager to decide when have you hit diminishing returns that it's no longer worth worth trying to solve that problem, or it's sufficiently solved. What's the next problem that you should work on? This is where I've spent a lot of time in my career. There's a reason product managers are expected to have technical backgrounds, because it's one thing to have a strategy, it's another thing to execute on the strategy. So it is a very important skill to be able to work on product development. But what separates great product managers from okay product managers is putting the whole package together, and that includes very much having a strong opinions and a strong methodology around the strategy and product strategy. Okay, so now you have a product that's ready to go. The next step is go to market. So that's actually shipping the product, getting into customers' hands, whether it be through a storefront. I personally have my first job as a product manager was in 2002, and I personally burned CDs of a GPS navigation software that people could buy and install on their laptops and send it out to partners, mailed it directly to customers, and I fell in love with really getting hands-on with that, having everything on here. This was a small company, about 100 people in New Jersey, and I got to do every single thing on this flow chart. So having that hands-on experience and being able to see all of it is a really interesting and enjoyable process. But certainly at a larger company, you would be more like typically in a supporting function for these things. Okay, now where the real fun is, test to what degree you actually solve the customer problems. So this is analyzing our customers using the product. Are they converting from a trial to a paid product? Are they buying more if you have a usage-based product? Are they churning off? Those kinds of things. Are they buying more? Are you hitting your revenue goals? So it's really a judgment call. Did you solve the problem? If yes, then you're hitting product market fit. You could still, this is not truly an either or. You can have product market fit and still continue to invest in the product. You want to deepen that competitive moat against your competitors to make sure that you're innovating and staying ahead of the market, or setting up the product to beat your competition. But if you're realizing, no, like we thought we knew what we were doing, but something happened that your hypothesis is not being proven out, do you go back and keep iterating on the direction that you were going on, or do you go back to the drawing board and say, well, maybe we missed something about the strategy or missed something about the job to be done? Anything in this entire spectrum that could have been wrong, it's your job to figure out what could be better. Okay, product strategy, expected versus actual. And this is where, having done this for a while, I think it's easy to believe you're doing a good job without rigorously holding yourself to evaluating against the plan that you set out. So I'm just going to read this quote in full. This is from Clayton Christensen from his book, How Will You Measure Your Life? He's better known for The Innovator's Dilemma. It says, how you allocate your resources is where the rubber meets the road. Real strategy, in companies and in our lives, is created through hundreds of everyday decisions about where we spend our resources. As you're living your life from day to day, how do you make sure you're heading in the right direction? Watch where your resources flow. If they're not supporting the strategy you've decided upon, then you're not implementing that strategy at all. And I've seen this in all shapes and sizes. So, but very hard to do. So here's one thing that I would suggest, and I will plan to do myself in my next role, is track your time. Um, your resources start with yourself, manage yourself, and intentionally rebalance. So if the product manager's job is really to be an expert on the market, the customer problem, the focused on the problem space, you should see that you are spending your time in that left, that top left box of finding an unmet need. So that means getting out in the field, watching customers, watching users, talking to buyers. If you're not spending your time there, then consider if you are really focused on the right place or if you are really spending more time building the solution. Um, uh, and these are just hypothetical numbers here, and I added two here. So bottom left, I also added a box for relationships. Sales product management is very much a relationship business. It's very important to build relationships up, down, across the business, and relationships take time. Just from your personal relationships and work relationships are not significantly different. It takes time to build those. Invite people out to lunch, get to know them personally, understand what their dreams, goals, and fears are. um, that's I think that is worth calling out its own separate box for time investment. And then I had another one for overhead. Certainly at certain companies, you could be spending a significant portion of your time in status meetings and any number of things which don't neatly fit into one of these other boxes, which would be considered um, you know are you really adding to the value of the product and really adding showing the value of your role. So you could attempt to track the time or actual dollars spent by everybody contributing to the product. If you have 3 product marketers working just on your product, that's a huge investment in the go-to-market. But maybe it's 0. You could certainly try to do that and say, what is your contribution versus the people's total contribution, and even convert that into dollars. If fully loaded salaries for all of these people, you could get very detailed on that if you wanted to. But if nothing else, think about your time, because you may be surprised where you spend your time or not. Okay, so while that I showed it just simplistically as a one loop flow chart, it's really very much the iteration in the solution space. This is where you can fall into the build trap, because it's very easy to start thinking like, okay, iterate. What's the next iteration? So there is should be a check back on your segments and your strategy and your investments periodically. But certainly you wouldn't do that at the same cycle of iteration that you do on the solution space. I read this excellent book recently, The Product Manager Survival Guide. It says evaluate your strategy and your product strategy at the cycle of evolution of the market. So if you're in a consumer business that changes rapidly, maybe you have to do that every quarter, or maybe even every month. Certainly, we've seen how dynamic the market could be over the last year. Huge changes. You may need to dig deeper and do more research, more analysis during times of more turbulence. Whereas in perhaps the large enterprise space, maybe once a year is enough to do really deep dive. Assume you know nothing, go back and check all your assumptions. But any of these things could change at any time. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and really think about how any organization could choose to structure their product team in particular. A lot of this assumes a hierarchy. Vast majority of companies I'm familiar with have hierarchies in the product organization, and this is one way to think about pros, cons, considerations of how you could organize. Okay, so product market fit. So let's take a step back 5,000 years, the beginning of the Bronze Age. Let's say people just start cooking in metal pots. So let's say you're an enterprising Neanderthal, and you say, or I think it's Homo sapiens, and you're starting to see people cooking over fires, and you say, well, they're stirring it with a stick. Surely there's got to be a better way. Stick's not so great. And you say, all right, I'm going to fill it with a product or a feature. come up with a spoon, right? You can stir more effectively. You can take a little sample of the stew and taste it as you're cooking. Um, so yeah, I have a great idea. I'm going to start making spoons. Okay, so go through that flow chart. I have uh, I have hypothesis that there's an unmet need. I'm going to create spoons. Do I solve it? Well, okay, I'm going to walk around my village and a neighboring village, and I see all of a sudden I see people using the spoons that I was selling, and they're telling their neighbors about it. People are asking me for more spoons. Great, I have product market fit with spoons. Okay, so now let's put a marketing lens on it. Let's say you have a market segment. Okay, you have the family cook who makes a stew over an open fire, and they're stirring it with a stick. So willingness to pay. Let's say you've talked to them and they say they'd pay $2 for that, and are they the decision maker whether they want to buy a spoon or not, or some other implement? Yes, they are. And are they the user of this implement? Yes, they are. Okay, very simplistic example. So what you sell, you have a spoon, right? Well, you have one SKU of a spoon, you sell it for $1, and you've built a spoon. So many people will, jump right to the spoon part of it and then figure out the market segment. But in a perfect world, as a product manager, you would really be thinking about the market segment first, and then thinking about what is the solution for that. Okay, but this is where things can get interesting. Is okay, let's say did we solve that with a spoon, and you walk around, you see everybody with spoons? Yes, you do. But what if, as you're wandering around your villages, you also see all these children suddenly playing with spoons, and they're using it to bang pots? You say, well, they bought spoons from you, so they they show up in your data. You're making money from them, but it wasn't a market segment you had intentionally gone after. But that's certainly interesting, right? They are a market. What should you do about that? So let's say you actually spend some time thinking about that. Okay, you're gonna, you still have your existing market there that you intentionally went after, and then you realize that there's another market. So child music maker. Now it gets a little more interesting. So the user persona is now a child, let's say age 2 to 4. Willingness to pay, 0. Kids don't have any money. They're not the decision maker of whether to buy or not, but they are the user of the product. But now you have a new persona entering, the buyer persona. So the caregiver, right? The child's parent or grandparent. And surprisingly, they have a willingness to pay of $3 because it's now a gift or a present. It's not something that is more utilitarian. And they're the decision maker for whether they buy it, but they're not the user. So this is where things can get particularly interesting, especially in a business to business scenario. But it really just talks about how you can have one solution with very different use cases. So now let's say this is where it gets interesting between the product manager for the job to be done. The job to be done, I glossed over that at the beginning, but job to be done is what is the person trying to accomplish, and has nothing to do with whatever solution they're doing that they're using to do that right now. So as a product manager, do you align yourself around spoons or do you align yourself around the problem? So in this scenario, I would argue that companies are seeing that it's very important to have product managers really be focused on the problem. It should really be a problem manager, or I would argue a product market fit manager, of starting with the market first and then finding the right solutions for that. So you could organize with jobs to be done, which is feeding people, right? Anything to do with sustaining yourself, or the job to be done for making music, right? Every culture on the face of the earth has music. So both of these are huge inherent human needs, and is really the basis of human-centered design. But in this case, we could both start with spoons. But depending how you organize, you could end up in very different directions. So in this example, let's say you did chose to focus on the jobs to be done. This could really focus, could drive innovation. So if you say, all right, we're going to focus on feeding people, you could end up with additional markets such as industrial bakers, and creating, moving from spoons to, fast forward 4,000 years to mixers and industrial mixers, for baking bread for thousands of people, right? That goes in a very different direction than maybe you have another area, or maybe you say, oh, we're going to seed that market to another organization about music makers, and you're going to evolve from spoons to creating drum kits and drum machines and all kinds of instruments and so on. So just a very simple example about how your decision about how to organize and incentivize your product teams could create very different outcomes. But I think there's a growing um, realization that having product managers really specialize in the problem space and not be tied to a particular technology or a solution really accelerates innovation and creates better products for customers faster. Um, so thinking about org chart is don't ship the org chart is if you this is really where Scrum teams I think are where we're seeing the drawbacks is if your Scrum teams are organized as if they are components in a component hierarchy, you're really not organized around solving the problem. So you what I found, and I think a lot of people are realizing, is that Agile is great for shipping good product faster, but is it the right product? Is it solving an important need urgently? Okay, so as a product manager, certainly something that I want to focus on and improve is advocating for your impact, advocating for my own impact. Uh, Nobody's going to do this analysis for you if you're an organization of any size where there's any kind of fuzziness. So prove beyond a reasonable doubt the value that you personally have created and will create in the future. You can use that through data to try to create an ROI, return on investment model that you can attribute to your product, your sphere of influence, your feature area, your team, wherever you want to draw those boundaries. Try to draw it out as a real business analyst. With your um, money you've made, money you've saved, and then divide that by your total salaries, fully loaded, your cost of goods sold. If you have I've worked in media where we had very fixed media costs, or not fixed, but very clear media costs. We had to write checks to content producers or to publishers and so on. Your sales and marketing, including sales commissions, any whatever you think. If putting on a true business owner hat, anything that you think should show up on your statement, put that in there and really understand if you're creating value for the organization. And do that over time, right? If you've been in the role for 18 months, you should be able to show what was your plan that you started with, and then where did you actually end up? And if there's a variance, why was there a variance? So if you know that you're going to do this kind of plan later, it will incentivize you to really put the homework into a plan in the first place, which really everybody should be asking you for, but often doesn't happen. So hold yourself accountable to that. And then going forward, say this is where we plan to invest, and are the planned outcomes. And if we do nothing, what is that delta? Why should the organization continue to invest in your team, in your product area, and other resources contributing to your product? Very hard to do, but it's a worthwhile exercise. And the other important part of product management is storytelling, because people can say, well, the data is nice, but is anybody going to really trust that 100%? So the storytelling is the other part of it. Talk about adoption. Talk about stories you're hearing from customers using your product. Are they recommending it to to their peer group? And then talk about it from the negative, the other side. What would be the negative impact if you got hit by a bus last year? You say we wouldn't be reaping the benefits that we are right now, and here are the plans that we have for next year. Show that you are really invested in the business, that you're really putting the work into it, and have a vision and a plan, and you can execute on it. So this is something of reputation or credibility that you can really build up really over the course of your career. It's a never-ending cycle, and hopefully a positive cycle. And when things aren't going well, what have you learned? How are you going to get back on track? So if you do these things well, those top right is get your boss to respect and trust you, and get your colleagues to respect and trust you. And all these things are interconnected, because you can also show, how is everyone contributing to this? It's not just you. It's truly a team effort. Okay, so moving on into the solution space again, this is where it's so easy to spend your time, because it has the satisfaction of being tangible, being clear, having a clear starting point, a clear ending point. it is not the be all end all of product management, but this is, you cannot divorce the solution space from the problem space. So through all of this, it is, I have had I have worn the hats of the product manager, a product owner, and a product designer, a user experience designer through all of this. And so on any given day, I could be doing any of these activities. Um, and I should be clear, like I've worked on products where there was no user experience designer. I was it. I was creating the specs to fulfill the strategy that I created. Um, so it's very hard to draw the boundaries between these things. The important thing is that it gets done. It gets done well, either by you, but ideally not by you, so that you can focus on the more of the strategic aspects. Okay, so in this case, this is one of the documents that I've used at one of my former employers. The idea is that my product strategy is clear, it's prioritized, it's actionable, it's transparent, and it is always evolving. And if I've done my job well, if I've done my homework, it is not evolving radically. Like it's not roller coastering up and down, completely reshaping it. It might be adding a row, changing, changing a bit of scope, deleting things, moving things out of scope as unknowns become apparent. But I would literally change this probably 3 or 4 times a week, just based on anything that could be changing. But to the point where it's not causing churn or heartburn for my stakeholders, for my colleagues, but where it's um, really improving return on investment and solving the problems we have with the resources that we have, which are often limited. So it's hard making hard choices. Um, and then on the design side, you'll see this quote here from David Schwartz, the VP of product. I think it's very important for the product manager to not pretend that design is not under the, um, you know, very closely tied in with the sphere of influence of the product manager. But he's basically saying, and which I completely agree with, is if you're just starting out, don't start with just the functional um, baseline functionality. Figure out how do you make a, a delightful product that's easy to use, that's fun to use, and solves the problem, and then figure out how to add more functionality over time. Because your initial users will be, you know, they'll be judging you on the total customer experience, the total user experience, just as somebody 3 years from now when you've had time to really flesh out a full featured product. So how do you build in that philosophy from the beginning that you want a great user experience from the beginning, and you can add value over time? It's hard to quote slap on a good user experience later. So build that in early. The screenshot below is as an example from the Salesforce Lightning Console, which I was the product manager for, where an engineer had a great idea to say, oh, it used to be a gray box when you were dragging the tabs around. He's saying, it's actually possible to make it a ghost image of the tab, so it creates a better user experience as you're reorganizing tabs. And I just thought that was a great contribution from him to really focus on the user experience. And that wasn't like, oh, we would spend weeks planning it. It's like, hey, I saw an improvement, I did it, and that was it. So it wasn't a huge percentage of our time, but those fit and finish things really just show a commitment to the craft. Okay, the next thing is product requirements documents or functional specs. Uh, One thing that really stood out to me from the Product Manager Survival Guide is 2/3 of the book is on strategy, and then some of it is very simplified because it is the product manager's job to then write the product requirements document. And many people would argue that, well, that's the product owner's job. And like I said, I've never worked at an organization where I was the product manager and not the product owner. And yes, often as the product owner, I had to work with other adjacent teams where our work, overlapped or influenced each other. It's always been a team sport. But I've always been really, really conscientious of my PRDs, my functional specs. And that's user stories, acceptance criteria. So personally, it's something I'm needing to let go of some of the control and the attention to detail that I'm used to, and really trust and empower my colleagues to do great work without me having to get into the weeds. But that is, that's the next plane of product management for me that I plan to work on, which is really done by setting customer context. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Please go solve it, and we'll stay aligned as we need to. I will, be glad to give feedback and advise and listen and share ideas, but not from a product owner in the weeds perspective. This is the be all end all that I try to leave my teams with, and people, whether they report to me or not, is as the product manager for a particular problem or particular area, or particular market. Again, that's where it gets challenging. That's where it gets fuzzy, as you can imagine. But I wake up every day feeling that I'm accountable to customer success and I'm accountable to the business of the product, to showing growth, to showing uh, increased competitive mode against our competitors, to increasing our differentiation to become a market leader, to ensuring that we're not at a risk of being overtaken by a competitor. I take extreme accountability to that, and executing on the product is part of that. But it takes more people than me to create that value for the company. So it's very much a leadership role without direct authority, which is very gratifying when it's done well. It is forever challenging, but I can't think of anything else I would rather do. It is incredibly fun and incredibly rewarding to help customers and create a growing business when it's done well. So this is my thoughts on product management. I would love to hear from people and see, does this match the reality at other companies? Where could things be improved? Where is technology and product management going in general? It will be it's always a dynamic conversation. Thank you.